So welcome back. We are back talking about the generations, millennial generation versus the generation Z. You guys are going to be getting into your generation, hopefully understanding what it takes to be successful with you guys going forward. Some of the things that I hope you guys become aware of is how you guys can succeed on your own online. So the idea of doing a class project is not important. Doing a project on your own is much more important. And you can develop that not only on your own with a PPT, but with a YouTube video or a TikTok video, and you could get 1 billion views. So
to get into the idea of the millennials and Generation Z, what it is, millennials, also known as Generation Y or Gen Y, are the demographic following Generation X and before Generation Z. Researchers and popular media use early 1980s as the starting birth years and the mid 1990s to the early 2000s as the ending birth years, with the 1981 to 1996 being widely accepted definition. Members of the Generation Z loosely are people born from 1995 to 2010. They're true digital natives. From the earliest youth, they have been exposed to the internet and social media and to mobile systems. So as we talk about with normal people of my generation being exposed to classes and needing a degree and graduation in order to start to be competitive for a company, the Gen Y or Gen Z is able to start developing these details and present specializations on your own. And I understand, Gregoire, you are here now, but I don't see, can you share your link to your...
So I can start now?
Yes, everybody is waiting for you.
Okay, my bad. So hello everyone, this is Grégoire Robert, and I'm here today for talking about what makes millennials and Generation Z so different. So can we go next slide, please? Next one again. Next one, yeah. So who are the millennials? So the millennials, the eco-boomers or Peter Pan generation, those are the individuals who were born between 1982 and 1995. Most millennials were between 7 and 20 when the 9/11 terrorist attack shocked all the nation around the world. And many were old enough to understand the historical significance of this moment. They also grew up in the shadow of the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, which contributes to intense politicalization of this generation. And beyond politics, most millennials came of the age of entered the workforce, facing the height of an economic recession, which lead them to make different life choices, such like future earning and entrance to adulthood. So all of these have been shaped by the recession in a way that may not be the case for the youngest generation. Can we go other slide, please? Thank you. So who are the Z generation? Generation Z represents 24% of the US population and is very different from earlier generation, from older generation. So this is the workforce of tomorrow. They are more open to diversity and they are more individualistic thanks to technology. Generation Z was the people which were born between 1985 and 2012. They are also called the Gen Zers. So it represents 32% of the global population. and they were experienced a lot of disruption in a short time, such like political, technological, social, and economic landscape disruptions. So Gen Zers are critical for the success of business, so we gain a comparative advantage in comparison with others' generation. Can we go next slide, please? Thank you. So technology play a central role in most aspects of our life. So like communication, socialization, our life of Gen Zers, sorry. So yeah, in communication, socialization, and leisure activities. For example, in 2018, 95% of teens said they have an access to smartphone, and 45% of teens said we are constantly online. But on the flip side of this this fact, the constant engagement with a smartphone and new technology, it leads to an addiction to new technology, to lack of sleep, some attention deficit issues, and sometimes some depressions. So compared to the previous generation, the ready access to technology makes Generation Z more individualistic in learning, interpersonal interaction and communications. So the Gen Z, the Z generation is in comparison with millennials. So yeah, the Z generation are in lack of social skills in comparison with millennials, because we're spending more time on new technology, on smartphone, conversing with our friend online, on social media and everything, in comparison with millennials, who are more suitable to meet in person or in real life. So also, the Z generation are more racially and ethnically diverse than any other generation. For example, 48% of Z generation are more non-white compared to 38% of millennials, like for the millennials generation. So it makes Z generation having a lower tolerance for inequality, because they have experienced a greater diversity of cultural perspective So as we all know, Generation Z loves social media, such like Instagram, Twitter, or Snapchat. So according to the Global Web Index, in fact, Generation Z spend an average of 3 hours per day on social media. The Z generation also processes information faster than any other generation, including millennials, because we are living in a constant world of updates thanks to the social media. Can we go next slide, please? Thank you. So for conclude, I would like to conclude with some fact about our two generations. So we have some similarities, even with the millennials generation, even if we are really different. So like both of our generation is nicely diversified, even more like the new generation, so the Z generation. And both of our generation is an online generation. So according to the Adobe, into the UK's the content consumption habits, Generation Z and millennials have an average of 10.6 average engaging hours with online content. And yes, and but millennials generation is more cooperative than Z generation. So like 79% of Z generation would rather have their own workspace than sharing it with any other one, where millennials would rather share it with a coworker. So can you go next slide, please? So for finishing this, I would like to tell you that my process of researching information was on several supports, like YouTube, Scopus, or the course, or some Dongsan library documents. So I would like to share. I will share my my bibliography afterward. Thank you for listening, everyone.
Okay. I would like to use this as an opportunity to talk about the Gen Z and millennial generation, how you guys now are less focused on living in a classroom with a degree and more individual online activities. So using this presentation as an example, how can we use this to differ from a person that is born like me in the 1970s? Any ideas? Any comments? How about Adrian?
Yes, Professor.
What would you be able to say is a difference between somebody giving a presentation today versus somebody at my age graduating, being born back in the 1970s?
I would say that the teaching, like way of teaching, were really different and has really evolved, especially with the numerical transition. And now, I think that most of the way we're used to learn are somehow like kind of old and are not really adapted for young people, which are used to have way more like screens and everything rather than books and everything. So I think that just are really different to compare our generation with the older one.
Okay, can we get some examples of how? How are the younger generation, the millennials, and the even younger generation Z different, and how do you need to adjust your life? Eloise, what would you say?
I think it depends about the people. There are people at your age can use a PPT, for example, for presentation like this because they learn in their job, so they can do now. But I think for us it's more intuitive because we born with that, so we learn that more younger in our school. So
well, everybody is born young. um, let's get into more specific details. For example, you were talking about using PPT. How must a person today be able to use PPT in order to interact individually, not in the group? In the past, you could have a student sharing something for a class project and everybody in the class understands. Nowadays, it says that the generation Z or the millennials, they are presenting the PPT directly to the companies, directly to the employers. How do we have to present a PPT to be professional? Is there any changes? Do you want to start, Gregoire, by commenting? What are a few things that you could recommend could be changed with your presentation to be the best possible PPT presentation? Eloise or Gregoire, do you have any comments?
For company?
For you, for a presentation, to give a presentation to a company, yes. Is your PPT perfect? Is your PPT ideal? Is there something that should be included to be ideal?
Yes,
I think it depends about the company. We need to see with the company. For example, this PPT I think is a good PPT for communications company, but for the financial company is not good because they are too color, yeah, and too much picture, and yeah, it's very depends. It's very different about the company we want to show this PPT.
Okay, Gregoire, you were about to give some comments about the PPT. What are some things that?
Yeah, I would say that maybe I would make less picture. I would put less picture, maybe some graph that I can do by myself, like a homemade graph. It could be nice and it will improve the presentation a lot. Maybe on some of my slides, it look a little bit too much empty. So I can add some, I don't know, some details for looking, but not too much. I just want it to be still light, but yeah, I think there is also some other stuff, but I'm not thinking about them now.
What are some of the things that are required even 50 years ago? Back in my generation, there's a consistent presentation required in order to be professional.
Can I comment on that?
Yes, please.
So I think his presentation is balanced with pictures and the text. What he is missing is some examples. And of course, on the last part, there should be resources that he used, references and everything as a link, and the sites.
Yes, absolutely. Every one of you, as you said, we can still see this presentation. You are moving to become more individual than cooperative with a class focused. So if you're not relying on the teacher, you're not relying on the class to back you up, it's just yourself, you have to be responsible for everything you're presenting. And as you say, for example, here, 32% of the global population is Generation Z, according to who? If you don't give references, you're opening yourself up to huge attack. You must give references. Yes, make sure that you give good references. And one thing that I remind all of you is with the Kakao University, one of the best things about this university is that we have access to millions of dollars of databases, the world's best databases with the Scopus and the Web of Science information. So by giving that as references, that's something that the company doesn't have access to, that would be very, very valuable. And that would help you for sure as an individual, not just the group. Anything else? How can you connect better with the companies? Every single one of you, I assume, want to connect well with a certain employer in the future. So one way that we talk about is by sharing proper references and the facts, data. What else? How can the millennial generation and Generation Z differ than somebody born basically in the 1950s, 60s, 70s? What is another difference in connections? Anybody?
I feel like can I say?
Yes, go ahead.
I feel like in order to connect with the company or the certain person that works in the company, is that to learn more about what company does, and like from the outside. Of course, they can't learn anything from the inside. And difference between millennials and Gen Z is that millennials, when they were applying to the job, as I know, they would make a CV and go for the interview. It's still like that, but making a PPT right now in Gen Z, they usually prefer to talk more about the company, and they show how they can change it for the better.
Okay, how would that be different than a presentation 30 years ago? It's not clear yet. What I'm trying to make sure that we identify are the access to information. We actually have easier access to information nowadays, so you can share that. And not just the information, but the people, access to people. How do you have more access to people?
Through social media, massive
yes,
social media.
Through social media, yes. So how can each one of you use that for your benefit going forward? It is what? May. We are close to the summertime. You guys, some of you may be getting close to graduation. In the past 30 years ago, some of you would wait until graduation before you contact a company. Nowadays, a lot of the millennials and even more of the Generation Z start contacting companies today. How can you do that? Vincent, do you have an idea?
We can do that with internet. So we can do that on the website of the company, or all the social network of the company, or with the LinkedIn of someone of the company. We have a lot of options to do and to speak with the company we want to enter for internship or something like that.
LinkedIn was the key word that I was definitely looking for. Every single one of you, you are plugged in with social media for sure, but possibly through Instagram or through Facebook or through just a purely social website. But the LinkedIn is a professional way to get in touch with people inside companies. And it's relatively easy to contact almost anybody in any company now through LinkedIn. So when you start your presentation, you can get a lot of details from the journals and the $1 million library system that the university has. But then you can also get information by surveying and talking to people or sharing some of that valuable information to people in social media or LinkedIn. I don't know how you could easily get the information through Instagram or through TikTok. Does anybody here have an idea of how you could use TikTok or how you can use Instagram or Flickr to develop relationships with companies? What are some other examples?
Complicated because it's just for the communication and touch the max of people we can touch. For example, if we take a big company like Netflix, when you see Instagram or TikTok, just for communicate what happened on the site and not really for internship or something like that. It's just it's just a tool for the communication or the marketing.
Okay.
I think,
go ahead.
I have experienced that I tried to use Instagram, Facebook, and to connect with the company, but unfortunately they will not answer. It's difficult to communicate with them. We can just follow the informations, but we cannot contact with them. They will not answer.
Is that true? The idea that there are the Gen Z and millennials working with many companies now, so people your age may be very active in TikTok, they may be very active in Instagram or other online social media, and so you can connect with other people your age and help them develop their jobs online. And so that could be a way that you can open doors and help yourself make a presence inside companies. That idea that the old-fashioned student just goes to school, finishes school, graduates, and then presents a graduation certificate to a company, that is disappearing. How many of you are relying on just the university graduation certificate to get you a job? How many of you think that you need to have something else, like a class presentation to open relationships? Zarnigar, what do you think? How are you planning to get your ultimate employment? And then we're going to go through and talk with each student as we go through. Adrian, Arthur, Fahim?
Yeah, not exactly after graduating university. I have a lot of plans for the future for my studies. So university won't be the last study that I'm gonna do. So I'm definitely not relying on my diploma.
Okay, so what are you relying on for your employment later on?
The further studies, of course. After graduating university, yes.
A master's or a PhD
yeah, master's
degree?
Yeah, master's degree, definitely, yes. And then I will see the rest if I want to do the PhD.
Okay, so it sounds like you're still thinking the old-fashioned way of waiting until you have a certificate from a university before you can start relationships with it. And so what I believe Gregoire was presenting is the idea that the millennials and Gen Z, they are so different because they're more individual, they're more independent, they are more working on their own, providing something of value directly to the company rather than just waiting in the groups for graduation. So Malik, Fahim Malik, what about you?
I think the company, they will focus on skills. So I think the certificates will not be applicable in the, I think this will be applicable, but they will more focusing on the skill and knowledge, experience, these things. So we have to be productive and innovative if we are going to a company.
You have to be more productive? How? Can you explain a little bit more about that?
I don't know if we going to be a company, then they will expect something better from us. They will focus something new, like we have to be creative. So just like that.
You have to be creative. How? For example, this presentation, we have week 9, week 10,
yes,
up to week 15. But then after week 15, do you expect just by having a university certificate to be able to open doors to get a job in the company you want? Or do you think that you need some relationship? For example, in your you were going to present week 9, present something, and then other people like Gregoire presented today in week 10. Could he use this presentation to start developing relationships with a company? And could that lead to a job? Is that something that is more likely with LinkedIn connections than what was in the past?
Yes, I think we are presented everyone. So if we presented if we presented same things, then I think you will not like these things, but you will ask for something new. So just like that, my intention is that we have to be creative on our work, like something new to show.
Yeah, that's my question. What could you do new? What could you do creative in Generation Z or with the millennial generation now that they didn't usually do 30 years ago?
Okay, so nowadays Are you talking about nowadays or present?
Yeah, I'm talking about the younger generation, the millennial generation, or the Generation Z generation. What do they increasingly have to do?
I think
They don't usually stay in a classroom until graduation and then walk up to a company and show, here is my degree from Kim Young University, now give me a job. That doesn't usually happen. The company requires them to do something more. You need to add value earlier,
yes,
before the degree.
yes. How can I say? I think digitalization is one of the important thing. Like we can focus on these things, and we can uh, we had to focus. We can also focus on languages.
Can you describe that more? What do you mean digitalization and languages? How do you use that to gain employment?
Because nowadays, like in Korea, English is very important. Like most of Korean, they are not so well in English. So there is a very good opportunity for English speaker. So just like that, in everywhere, there will be some requirement uh, in some things like the languages or technology. Uh, so just like that. So my point is that.
Okay. And what about the rest of you? Can we hear from some of the rest of you?
Professor, may I give my comments?
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to say that I think only 10 or 20% of the students, only 10 maybe, can apply to the work without diploma. Nowadays, no one, any this professional companies cannot hire the people without diploma. So I think it's important to get a diploma at first. Not at first, but to get a job, diploma is important, because without diploma, none of the company will hire the people. Even I can give an example. At my university, I wanted to work as a student work, just sitting at the computer room, looking at the computer. But when I visited to get a job to the staff, they asked me, you need to be a graduate bachelor's degree at first, and you need to start your study, and you have to be in your master's degree. I was surprised. Why do I need master's degree just sitting the room? It's just an example in my university. But when I'm searching the job, everyone asked not a bachelor's degree, but master's degree. So I think it's very difficult to get a job without diploma nowadays. Only
by just becoming, let's say, experienced at it. And I follow a lot of creators on TikTok. For example, there are a lot of ad makers, advertisement makers, and they usually make like a minute of their creation, and then they are usually given a job from a lot of companies. And I can say that people don't need any degree if they're a creator. For example, you don't need a degree to be a painter or anything like that. So I feel like saying that getting a job only by relying on diploma is partially wrong.
Right. It's increasingly wrong. And there is a system to ease the flow. For example, if you realize that the top universities have access to the best research, the best benchmarking practices, the cutting edge details, by being able to find that information that the university pays for, and then share that with a company, and at least know how to find that, know how to summarize it, or to filter it down so that it's useful for a company in reports. That is usually some of the best ways. And by being what you were saying earlier, by being an influencer, that's the alternate word. There's two ways to become popular. One is to become a specialist in something with the best information. The other way is by being a specialist with the most followers, by being very popular. If you're very popular, that is another way to do it. Yes. If you can combine the two, that is ideal. That is the best. So everyone in class should be using our class requirements to develop some specialization that can help the company. Find something, give that to the company so that it helps the company do something. That's usually the best. Has anybody thought about doing that so far? What about Park Yebin or Jung Sa Jungwoo or Hyunakdo? What about the Korean students in class? they're not in class. I guess the Koreans aren't showing up to class. Okay. So we're waiting for your answer. Are any of the Koreans active in class today or not? I guess they're not active in class. What about Laura? What do you plan to do for developing your future and your career?
I'm still thinking about it and watching what happens.
So you're waiting and seeing. You don't actually have a proactive plan?
No, I'm actually doing some interviews.
Oh, okay. So interviewing before you graduate is one way. How are you showing value to a company beforehand? Or are you just interviewing for the intern position alone?
Actually, it depends. Sometimes I'm just like searching a job, and sometimes I'm just like seeing what's the company doing and just like sending them my CV and looking if they're interesting. And how is it going? I'm just like, sometimes I'm passing exams and tests, sometimes directly interviews, and of course, sometimes nothing at all.
Are you using the university funnel as we described, the way that you can get university articles, get university research details, and provide that to companies? Have you been thinking about that and starting to develop that stream?
No.
Develop any of your class papers for your potential employers?
No.
Can you describe what that system is?
Do you mean for a company or for you?
For a company.
I could explain this for a company as like a library they cannot access. Like sometimes that's like open for me, but they would have to pay a lot to have access for it.
Okay, yes. And you can provide that to some of the managers trying to find out what are the best companies or the competitors, perhaps even in South Africa or in other parts of the world, right?
Yes.
Okay. Have you started thinking about the industries you're interested in and what are the benchmarking companies in those industries or the cutting edge research in those areas?
for the moment, I'm not especially looking for industry, but more like a kind of job. So I'm searching for finance, and the industry where I will be doing finance for the moment, it's not the most important point of my life.
Okay, so with finance, for example, on the picture that we see here, we see that the millennials are more optimists and the Gen Z are more realists. But with finance, we must be thinking about blockchain. We must be thinking about cryptocurrencies. That whole idea of banks are old-fashioned. Banks require very high agency fees. So how would, Julie, would you have a comment on how students could interact with the finance and banking companies?
No, I don't know.
Could anybody think of how the Gen Z realists and the millennial optimists would be thinking about finance going forward? And how somebody born in the 1950s or 60s or 70s would have a different view. The old view is to go through banking, and everybody used banks for a middleman to pay certain fees and to make sure things are going to be paid properly. But the new people with blockchain and cryptocurrencies are completely different. Can anybody come up with an example of how that financial aspect would be changing?
Maybe because people want more freedom with all the cryptocurrencies, and we will have a complete transformation of financial system these years, especially because like people like Elon Musk are really using all their influence to make it bigger and to develop all these kind of things. Like for example, like we have seen the project of the spaceship, which is supposed to be financed with like Dogecoin, that has been announced by Elon Musk. So that is really crazy project. But even the Ethereum, which have been really used this past month, and we just see that finally um, the world is changing, and I think that the transformation of banking system will be one of the next big movement of this era of this century, maybe.
Okay, does anybody see how the cryptocurrency or Bitcoin is replacing banking? We heard that one student was interested in working with the banking industry. And we're just using an example of how Bitcoin or how Dogecoin impacts that. What is the impact of cryptocurrency? Is anybody aware? Jacovier, again, Hanakdo, I guess you're still not active. Pak Yebin, any? The idea that the banks made their center of power as center of trusts, because there was usually people that were transferring money between two different people, and you don't trust each other. They would give the money to the bank, having the banks as the center that you make sure that you get paid using this center of trust. But now with blockchain, you can see exactly where the funds are going to be going, exactly when the funds are going to be sent, and where the funds are going to be transferred. So with cryptocurrency and blockchain, you don't need that center that is going to be taking out your agency fee for trust. So it's a lot cheaper to go direct with the blockchains. So that's one aspect of how younger students can change. They can make a presentation about that. Another presentation is the whole idea of introducing the research and the presentation about those things. That could be one thing. As we see here with the millennials, it says that the millennials generally prefer text messages and basic details, optimizing what are the good things about cryptocurrency or finance, versus the Gen Z would be more of the Instagram or the PPT talking about the blockchain and the images. So make sure that you're aware that developing your presentation, the final presentation, when you present it to the company, that should be most important, more important than just giving it to a university for your degree, things like that. So make sure you're copying these details as we see on the slides here. So the key findings are with the Generation Z, they're more global, they're more under the influence of international details. As we just said, we know about Elon Musk using Dogecoin to fund his rocket ships and things like that. They're more demanding. They're eager to stand out, and they have certain experiences. They're pro-social responsibility, trying to help others. So any ideas of, for example, how Bitcoin or blockchain can impact pro-social responsibility? Anybody interested in social responsibility programs? Golcano, Eloise, any idea of how Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies interact with that pro-social responsibility details? As we see here, the ethics and the message are most important to me. You cannot expect people to buy your products if your ethics are trash. That whole concept of working with big banks, with the huge bankers being too big to fail, too rich to fail, the 2008, 2018 financial crises, where the banks were just getting crazy rich. A lot of people think is actually bad. Bankers are too rich. And so that idea of blockchain, where you don't have to pay bankers, that's more pro-social responsibility. And that could be used with even the poorest of the world, where they don't have to pay agency fees. It's more pro-social responsibility. And so if you start doing any of those things and you start helping with any sort of projects and you have those experiences, you can build upon those. The experiences I have had, they do define you in a way so that you can show them off, not just the value of the degree and the value of the image, but what you've actually started to do. Start using your class projects to interact with the world around you and try to use your class projects to help these companies you're working with. So who here is most eager to stand out? What is an example of a Generation Z more focused on innovation and uniqueness? Any ideas? Any ideas of somebody that in class that is interested in using your class project to interact with a company now? For example, I'm going through a gender equality and women leadership project through the World Bank and the International Financial Corporation. I'm talking about developing that right now in Vietnam. These things are around you all the time. There's small little opportunities around you all the time. You can use those to develop class projects and start interacting with people around you, and use that as an opportunity to work with the organizations you're interested in working with long before you actually graduate. Don't just wait until you graduate. Start interacting with the companies and the organizations you want to work with now. Can we get a couple of comments about the students in class and how you guys are hoping to use your projects going forward? Are you interested in just the exam, or are you interested in using a class project to go forward? So, Sa, Jungwoo, what about you?
Sorry, my network is not good, so may I know the question?
Related to class, what do you plan to use going forward? Do you plan to just use a university degree to get a job? Do you just want the exam and a degree, or do you plan to start interacting with the companies and have a relationship as soon as possible and develop a relationship to get a job? Use a class paper to go forward. Are you more interested in developing a class paper or just the exam?
For the future, I think developing the paper is better than the exam.
Okay, can you describe that and how that could help your future going forward?
Also, for example, when I do a test, I memorize some kind of part, and in the future, I can forget about that. But if I write some paper about my work, about the classes, I can submit it to the company when entering there, I guess. For example, if I write about Samsung in this class, I can submit the paper to Samsung when I go to the interview or giving some resume, I guess.
Right. Or using the paper now to start talking with the managers or the directors now. You can share the valuable library information to the director now, help them now, and start developing a working relationship now. You don't need to wait until later, until you're hired after the job. Yes, use the paper now for that. Good. What about Park Ye-bin?
Yeah, the idea of using the papers when entering a company is good, but for me right now, where I want to work, my work field, my future work field is somehow need some program skills, computer skills. So I think for now, the class paper doesn't really help. There is no help. But I have a question. you said that working with managers who are working right now, how can we contact them, like through the email or through the SNS?
Yes, and usually the easiest way to start developing relationships, as we said, is through LinkedIn. You can go through LinkedIn, typed in the company name, and it can tell you hundreds of people working for a company. And you can start contacting the youngest ones and sharing something of value to them so that they can look better to their boss, and then you can go direct. So most of the students in the past have contacted company workers, company employees by using the LinkedIn social media to contact them and use that for survey and start sharing some of the valuable library information. Is that understood?
Yeah.
Contact them and say that you're part of a research team. You have this valuable research information that you think is related to their job. And if you're interested, you can summarize these main points for you. And if they could tell you more about what the company is interested, you can refine the research to better help the company. So start contacting with the company early and show them that you have some sort of research now and that you can continue to refine that going forward.
So I can use the skills that learned through these classes, some doing research skills and building up some ideas in the future, like right
Absolutely.
now.
Yes.
Yeah.
You should learn how to research and find out what those workers are interested in, number one, and then you can find information through the library, number two, and start sharing information back to them. And use your class project as an excuse to give information back to them.